Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to look at President Biden's decision to pardon his son, Hunter.
Yeah.
Um, it's been in the news quite a bit. It's sparked a lot of different opinions on what it all means.
Right.
You had some really insightful comments about it. And we're going to use those to guide us through this deep dive.
Sure.
Try to kind of explore the potential impact of this whole situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a really fascinating case study. I mean, it goes beyond the legal kind of technicalities.
Right.
We're really looking at the heart of American democracy here and the questions that it brings up about power, ethics, public trust, all that.
For anybody who maybe hasn't been following along with the news as closely, just to kind of set the stage, what were the charges against Hunter Biden and what did this pardon mean for him legally?
So Hunter Biden was facing federal charges, one for a gun violation and the other for tax issues. And the pardon from President Biden basically wipes the slate clean.
Okay.
He no longer faces any legal consequences.
Okay, so no jail time, no fines, nothing like that.
Nothing. Yeah.
It's completely gone.
He's in the clear.
Yeah, and you mentioned this goes, beyond the legal aspects of it all. And in your comments, you brought up this concern about how this could potentially affect public trust. What is it about this pardon in particular that could be so damaging in the eyes of the public?
Well, presidential pardons are a power that presidents have.
Right.
But it's one of those things that can get really tricky.
Yeah.
Especially when it involves family.
Yeah.
It starts to look like someone's getting preferential treatment because of their family connection.
Exactly, yeah.
And that leads to the idea that, is there one system of justice for the powerful and another one for everyone else?
Exactly. Which
Which can really erode trust in the whole system.
Yeah, it feels a bit like that whole rules for thee but not for me kind of thing.
Exactly.
And that's a really dangerous sentiment, I think, when it comes to justice.
Oh, absolutely. It undermines the whole idea of, fairness and equality under the law.
Yeah.
If people start to think that the system is rigged,
Right.
that's a huge problem.
It's interesting. In your notes, you use this term institutional erosion, which is it's a pretty strong term.
Yeah.
What exactly is being eroded here?
It's basically faith in the system itself. A democracy relies on people believing in the institutions, trusting that they're going to be fair, that they're going to work for everyone. And when things like this happen, it can really chip away at that faith. Like, if people see those in power using the system to their own advantage or to benefit their family and friends, it just makes it harder to believe that the system is working for everyone. And we see this kind of erosion of trust happening in a lot of areas these days. There's a lot of data that shows that public trust in government has been declining for decades. Like a recent Pew Research poll, for instance, showed only 20% of Americans trust the government to do the right thing most of the time.
Wow, that's incredibly low.
Yeah. And so, when something like this pardon happens, it just sort of feeds into that narrative of distrust.
Yeah, it kind of reinforces that feeling that a lot of people already have.
Exactly. And that can be really dangerous for a democracy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's not just about, one individual case here. It's about a much bigger picture.
Yeah.
And you also raised some really important questions about the line between, presidential power and ethics. Where do personal loyalties end and responsibility to the public begin?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
And I don't think there's an easy answer. I mean, every president is going to face situations where those two things clash. They're human beings with their own families and friends.
Right.
And they also have a responsibility to the country as a whole.
Yeah.
And it's a constant balancing act. I mean, no one expects a president to just completely cut off their personal life and their personal relationships.
Right.
But there has to be some kind of line.
Yeah.
Some understanding that ultimately their primary responsibility is to the public good. And so this pardon really brings up that question. Did President Biden cross a line by using his power to benefit his son?
Yeah, and it's not a question with an easy answer. I mean, it's something that everyone has to kind of grapple with.
Absolutely. And it's something we need to keep talking about as a society.
Yeah. And of course, we have to talk about the whole issue of precedent.
Right.
What does this mean for future presidents? What kind of message does this send?
Yeah, that's a really crucial point. Because every action a president takes sets a precedent, right? So if this becomes sort of the standard,
Yeah.
then it could be much easier for future presidents to issue pardons that are, let's say, less than ethically sound.
Right, and it really makes you wonder, where does it end?
Exactly. And that's a concerning thought for sure.
It really is. So it's not just about this one particular pardon. It's about a bigger trend and, a bigger question about how we hold our leaders accountable.
Absolutely. And it really, feeds into those existing fears about political corruption
Yeah.
and the misuse of power. And, when you have a situation like this, it's just going to add to that cynicism and disillusionment that a lot of people are already feeling towards the government.
Yeah, and that feeling is really hard to combat.
It is. It is. It's going to take a lot of work
Yeah.
to rebuild that trust.
Well, this has been, it's been really insightful.
Well, thank you.
And it makes you realize that it's so much more than just a simple legal maneuver here. It really highlights that fragile balance between power and ethics and the importance of public trust in a functioning democracy.
I totally agree. It really forces us to think about these big questions about accountability, how we ensure it at the highest levels of government, and how we rebuild trust when it's been damaged.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave it for today. Here's a final thought for you to consider. If you were in President Biden's shoes, how would you have weighed all these competing factors? Would you have made the same decision? Thanks for joining us today for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.